Good day. My name is Don Green, and we're broadcasting today on an election special from Rigel Studios here in Las Vegas, Nevada. Many of you know me from the gun shows and my shows on the American Guns and Glory Network, produced by Rigel Studios. Because this is such a significant election cycle in Clark County, Nevada, and for many of you, it's Las Vegas area, I have with me a very special guest and one of my professional colleagues, Mr. Max Berkley, who's running for Justice of the Peace in Clark County, Nevada. Max, how are you today?
I'm good, thanks. It's
All
great
right.
to be with you.
Thank you. And Max, we understand about the justice court systems and everything, but before we get to that, can you tell the listening and viewing audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I was born in Las Vegas. So I've been here almost my entire life. I was born on a house located on Pebble and Eastern. At that time, there was no other home to the east or the south of us. It was just desert and mountains. So things have changed a whole lot out here. Las Vegas has grown considerably. I attended Bonanza High School. After graduating high school, I went to the University of Arizona, where I majored in political science. After that, I moved to Washington, D.C. for a year. I did staff assistant position, which was basically kind of an internship on Capitol Hill. Learned a little bit about the political process. Decided I want to go to law school. I was accepted into the Boyd School of Law, moved back to Las Vegas. I've been here ever since. After graduating law school, I applied and was given a job at the Public Defender's Office. That's where we got a chance to meet, and I've got a chance to see you in court a number of times. You've always been an excellent criminal defense attorney.
Thank you.
Someone that I think I've learned a good deal from. So I thank you for that. The job is very rewarding. It is very gratifying. It's challenging. It certainly brings me to court all the time, lots of cases, but it's certainly not an experience I'd trade for anything else. And I've been there for the last 11 years. And then in my personal life, I'll just quickly, I got married about 6 years ago. Met my wife 6 years ago, got married about 4 years ago. Make sure she knows I got the dates right. And we now have a 21-month-old boy and a 6-month-old son. So 2 little boys at home. So never a dull moment in my professional life or my personal life right now.
Well, just a moment ago, Max, you mentioned something about justice court, but perhaps many of our people in the studio audience or the listening audience and the viewing audience, they might not know about the court structures, and I think it's important. And can you run down for us the court structure in Nevada in particular?
Yes, absolutely. So on the bottom of the slide is where it says Justice Court and Municipal Court. That's where courts start. If somebody gets arrested, especially on a criminal case, they're either going to appear in Justice Court or Municipal Court. After that, if the case goes on, then it would move on to District Court. After District Court, and that's where there would be a trial. That's where someone would get sentenced if they pled to a felony or a gross misdemeanor. A number of other cases would get to District Court. If there is an appeal or it goes up to another level, the intermediate court is referred to as the Nevada Court of Appeals. That was only created in Nevada in 2014, so we've only had the Nevada Court of Appeals for about 8 years. That's where the case would go, and then if it gets appealed further, then it goes up to the Nevada Supreme Court, and that's the highest level court here in Nevada. Some unique cases, a case can go up to the federal Supreme Court after the Nevada Supreme Court, but typically the Nevada Supreme Court is the highest court in our state.
Yes, and you're running for Justice of the Peace. And we have a slide in just a moment. And there we are, Max Berkley, Justice of the Peace. Tell us something about what a Justice of the Peace, that court structure. Tell the audience about that.
Absolutely.
And we have a slide, please.
So with Justice Court, there are a total, I'll just start with a little bit of background explanation. So there are 16 total justice courts in the Las Vegas Township. Now, when I say Las Vegas Township, a lot of people get confused. That means city? Does that mean county? To
Yes.
simplify it, if you have a Las Vegas address, that means that you are part of the Las Vegas Township with the way, at least concerned with Justice Court. So there are 16 Justice Court departments. There are 15. The 16th was just created, and Nadia Wood prevailed already in the primary. So there's not a race anymore for that department, but basically there are about 4 or 5 races up right now, 16 total departments. What happens in Justice Court?
Yes, please put the slide up. Yes, there we go. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's the civil division. May we have the slide before that?
Yeah, and then
While we're here, tell us, is there a difference between the Justice Court Criminal Division and the Justice Court Civil Division?
there is.
And on the screen right now for the viewing audience, we have a Justice Court Civil Division. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So in Justice Court, if there is a claim made against somebody else, if you're suing somebody else for an amount of $10,000 or less, that would start off in Justice Court. In addition to that, there are some housing issues, some landlord-tenant issues, some eviction-type cases that go to Justice Court. Most of the Justice Court departments primarily do criminal, but absolutely it is a function of the Justice Court to also have civil cases. There are some hearing masters that sit in, but also some civil cases do go on, and certainly important for a justice of the peace to have some civil knowledge as well.
Can we go to slide 3 or 4? That's the one on Justice Court Criminal. There we go, Justice Court Jurisdiction. If you could run through and tell the audience what it is that someone, you've given us a general about how many departments there are in the new Department 16. Tell us what happens when, let's say someone is arrested on the strip at Mandalay Bay. Let's suppose that they're arrested. What happens in their case? If we could have that slide again, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So if they're arrested at Mandalay Bay, that whether it's a misdemeanor or a felony, that's going to put them in Justice Court. So they would go to court within 48 hours of being arrested. They've got a constitutional right to do that, to have their initial arraignment. They would, at that first court appearance, they would either be given a bail setting, or they would be given an OR. And then the third possibility is an OR. And just to clarify, OR means an own recognizance release. So they would be released without bail, which is certainly an option too.
Yes.
And there are times where a judge will decide, well, I don't want a monetary bail, but I'm also not comfortable just releasing someone outright. So they'll put conditions like intensive supervision where someone has to check in, or monitoring where someone is going to have to wear an ankle monitor. The person would still be let out on their own recognizance, but would have to wear an ankle monitor, while going through their case. So after their initial appearance, someone is given a return court date. The next court date typically is called the preliminary hearing. At the preliminary hearing, the district attorney has the burden to show slight or marginal evidence. If the structure kind of looks a little like a trial, it is certainly not a trial. There's some key distinctions, but it's similar in the sense that the district attorney would call witnesses. There'd be a defense attorney representing someone who'd get a chance to cross-examine those witnesses. And then after that hearing, the judge would determine if the state was able to show slight or marginal evidence. If they were able to do that, then it would get bound up to district court, where the individual typically would plead not guilty, and then a trial would be set. But just going back to the initial hearings and bail, that's a big part of what justice of the peace judges do. Frequently, that's probably since running for office, that's the question I get asked the most. And at first appearance, Typically the district attorney, if they want to hold someone with monetary bail, will make the arguments as to why that's necessary. And there was a case that came out a few years ago called Valdez Jimenez, which basically kind of sets the structure of what a justice court judge should be looking at. So after that decision is made, and that's a big function of what justice court judges do, then, as I mentioned, a hearing would be set. Now, if it's a misdemeanor, so what I kind of describe is what would happen if it were a felony or a gross misdemeanor. If it's a misdemeanor, there wouldn't be a preliminary hearing set.
Why not? Why wouldn't there be a preliminary hearing? What would it be called?
So it goes right up to a trial.
I see.
Yeah, it jumps right past the preliminary hearing. As far as I think the reasoning is, constitutionally, if someone is facing a felony or a gross misdemeanor, the state has to show why it should go up to district court. If it's a misdemeanor, those cases never go up to never go up to district court, So those cases always stay in justice court. So that's why there's no preliminary hearing, because even if they were able to show slight or marginal evidence, they're not binding it up to a higher court. The justice court judge is making the decision over there. So again, you're charged with a misdemeanor, you appear in justice court. After that date, you are then given a return, typically to come back for a misdemeanor trial, and that's all done at the justice court level.
You mentioned a moment ago about the bail hearings, and would you say that when you're at a bail hearing and as a justice of the peace, you have to make an on-the-spot decision right there? Do attorneys file court papers, or do they make requests for bail in court?
They have the option to do either of them. Typically, at the first initial appearance, which is the arraignment, typically it's done verbally. Certainly, if someone is hired ahead of time and wants to file a motion in writing, the defense attorney does have that option. Usually, though, at the first initial appearance, they haven't had time to do that, so it's typically done orally. There are times where a justice court judge will make a decision, but will tell the parties, if you want to hash this out further, or if there's more information I need to be aware of, file it in writing. And we do, at times, public defenders, private defense attorneys will file subsequent written motions to address custody or to address bail.
Now, we're going to emphasize this theme in a little bit as well, but would you say that in making these not spontaneous decisions, but informed decisions, would you say that the person behind that bench, the person in that black robe, has to have experience and temperament in order to make that decision? Because would you consider that maybe not a life-altering decision, but it's definitely going to be a decision of whether this man stays in custody or whether he's going to be a free man walking in with his attorney? Would you say that's an important factor, an important quality?
Absolutely, absolutely, and that is something in justice court that always takes up a tremendous amount of time and energy, because it's such an important decision, as you've alluded to. Thankfully, in my legal experience, I've been a public defender now for over 11 years, so I've been in justice court thousands of times, and I do think it helps, and I know you have as well.
Yes.
If somebody hasn't served, as an attorney, or hasn't been, a judge before, it can be difficult. And I know there are people that try to pick it up that only have civil experience, but it is difficult. And, as far as, applying the correct standards, listening to both sides, that's something that having a criminal background really helps.
And would you say that this is not a position for on-the-job training?
Absolutely, I would say that.
And tell us about the number of cases. Maybe we have the next slide, please. And tell us a little bit about the number of cases that are in any given day.
Sure. So I could tell you.
We'll get to we have on municipal court. Let's talk about we talk about justice court. Tell us a little bit about the municipal courts and what happens, because many of our, perhaps some people in our listening audience and viewing audience don't understand the difference between these two courts, and if you could explain a little bit about what's going on with the municipal court.
Absolutely. So I could tell you I've only appeared in justice court because I've only been employed by the county. With municipal court cases, I'll start by explaining it this way. If someone is arrested and charged with a felony or a gross misdemeanor, it doesn't matter whether someone is arrested in the city or county. They are going to appear in justice court. Municipal court only handles misdemeanor cases. But conversely, if someone is charged with a misdemeanor, then it could go to justice court or municipal court. It depends on the location of the arrest. So municipal court has jurisdiction over anyone that is arrested for a misdemeanor in the city area.
And you and I have been in Las Vegas for a long time. I don't want to know the years, but it's almost a century between the two of us. But many of the people who've lived here for years don't understand that. Almost all of the Las Vegas Strip is in the county, correct?
That's right.
It's anything north of Sahara, right in the middle of Sahara. And of course, it doglegs when you get up to across the freeway in I-15 and then down towards Nellis. So when you say it depends on where it happens, so if something happens on Fremont Street and it's a misdemeanor, a minor in consumption of alcohol, where would that, a person who's drunk and disorderly on Fremont Street, where would he have his or her case, where would that go?
Municipal court.
Okay, so, but if there was a shooting like we've had some on Fremont Street, those would go where?
Justice court.
Okay.
Assuming they're charged with a felony, which presumably they would be.
Yes. Now, tell us why you think that Max Berkley is the right man for this job.
I would answer it this way. This kind of goes a little bit with, I'll allude back to my explanation about myself, which is, after law school, I was faced with the decision a lot of, future attorneys have to make, which is, what type of law do I want to practice? And I always have been interested in public service. And part of the reason,
as with your family,
sure,
yes.
My family's been involved in public service for a long time. It was certainly a value that was passed on to my brother and I. So I wanted to do public service, but I loved being in the courtroom. So I didn't want to give that up either. So I thought to myself, what type of law would give me the opportunity to give back to the community, do public service, but at the same time get to appear in court every day. And public defender, just stood out to me. And I remember the very first day, and I'm sure in your criminal practice you probably have a similar, memory. I showed up to court, and it's very much just, there's a bunch of people in custody sitting right there. And, the attorney I was with said, all right, Max, go. Here's the questions you need to ask. Here's what we need to know to make the OR,
yes.
Pitch for this guy. We're going to be appointed on his case. Go ask him these questions and be ready to argue. And that was about 11 years ago. I loved it and been doing it ever since. So I think that's why I decided to become a public defender, and hopefully why people consider voting for me to be a justice of the peace.
Yes, and you never forget that first day, that first appearance. No. I was before a judge when I was in the district attorney's office. My very first appearance after leaving transferring from the appellate division to the criminal division. I had everything written down on a piece of paper, and we didn't have bar numbers back then. So I gave my name, looked at the judge, very nervous, deputy district attorney. Looked at the judge again, looked at my notes, and of course, the attorney I was with was, he was like, come on, Don, just get into it. So you'll see much of that. And so you believe that you have a broad-based experience and certainly the temperament from what I've seen, and
Thank you.
All the colleagues would say that of you. But when we're looking here, vote for Max Berkley, Justice of the Peace, and this is something that I guess you've been thinking about for some period of time.
Yes, and I think this is a perfect time to talk about what you said, which is on-the-job training and experience. I think early in my career, I would not have been comfortable just because I don't think I possess the amount of legal knowledge. I hadn't seen enough cases. I lacked a little bit of confidence early in my career. But I think now, after having tried so many cases, after having been in justice court for the last 11 years, I do feel comfortable, and I do feel that I possess the appropriate amount of knowledge, and I take this job seriously. This is a job that the public is going to vote on and trust somebody to serve them. And with the understanding that person not only is going to be motivated to serve the public, but also be able to master the material that's going to come in front of him or her. So I think now at this point, I feel confident, feel comfortable, and it's the right time in my life. I didn't know I'd be doing it with a 21-month-old and a 6-month-old child at home,
yes.
2 children at home, but it's been a fun year running, and thankfully I've got a supportive family. We're a little sleep deprived, but
yes,
we're having fun with it.
Well, being on sleep deprived, isn't it true that these departments start as early as 7:30 in the morning? So some of the judges go in rather early, sometimes 6 o'clock, 6:30 to prepare for that day and maybe look at some of the court briefs which have been filed.
Yes, absolutely, and I think that every judge has a little different style. For me, yes, I think if I'm fortunate enough to be elected, I anticipate getting to work very early because I want to know what's coming in front of me beforehand and review all the status check, the bench warrant returns, any information I need for initial arraignments, or if any hearings are on calendar. Being able to do that for an hour or two before court, I think is important. And I know there's a few current judges who I'm friendly with off the bench, and they try to do that partly also because, and this is something you've seen all the time, when you're in court, there are a lot of times where attorneys have a lot of different places to be. So the court calendar has got to be able to move. And part of the way the court calendar moves quickly is if all parties are prepared. That means the defense attorney, that means the district attorney, public defender, and the judge. And if a judge is looking at everything in front of him or her for the first time, court's going to go very slow, and you're not going to get as I think as educated of decisions, well thought out decisions. So yes, I think judges should plan on being to work early. As you mentioned, court starts early. It's either 7:30, 8. I think the latest one starts at 8:30, but the majority start between 7:30 and 8 o'clock. So you got to be an early riser, and you got to be able to get to work and be ready to work.
And I want to talk about just briefly. Are there any specialty courts in the justice court system?
Yes.
What are those?
There are. And those ones, so I mentioned there are 16 departments. The 2 most common cases that are charged in justice court are DUIs and domestic violence cases. So much so where they've actually created certain departments which exclusively deal with those type of cases. So there's 2 departments that just do DUI cases, 2 departments that just do domestic violence cases. So that means if you're someone facing either a DUI or a domestic violence charge, you are going to go to one of those specialty departments, and your entire case in justice court is going to be done in that department.
And what's the rationale if you know that there's judges that are strictly handling DUIs and battery domestic violence? Is it for specialization because of the nature of the issues?
I think that's part of it. I think there's a few reasons, and I think that is definitely one of the main reasons. And then I think the other option and the way it worked when I started practicing law was those cases would be mixed in with the other cases in each department, which is certainly a way to do it. But I think for efficiency's sake, powers that be, who make the decision, decided that let's isolate those type of cases. Let those justice court judges focus exclusively on them, because unfortunately there are a lot of them, and I think having a knowledgeable judge who can just focus on DUIs or domestic violence cases, I think, was the rationale behind it.
Yes. Now, we are now, I guess, in the post-COVID-19 world when it comes to the courts, and no one could have predicted. I couldn't have, you couldn't have thought about or even imagined the problems caused by COVID. Can you tell our audience how the Justice Court adapted to COVID, and now in what's happening in the post-COVID world as far as Justice Court is concerned?
Absolutely. I think the positive that came out of it was that we started using what's called blue jeans, which is basically like Zoom, the video court. And most judges prefer that individuals appear in person, but if somebody has 5 different courtrooms to be at, all within a half hour, and there's no way they're going to make each different appearance, an attorney can log in on Blue Jeans often and make an appearance that way. And also, it happens a lot in my cases where somebody doesn't live in Las Vegas, and would have to fly out here and book a hotel room, expensive, difficult to do. Now they can appear on Blue Jeans for a lot of their case. They're not going to be able to do an entire trial on Blue Jeans, but if it's for a sentencing, if it's for an initial appearance, Blue Jeans is utilized, and it does also lighten up how busy the courtroom is, so it's a little bit easier to move around. So that's the positive that came out of it. There are obviously a lot of negatives, and the biggest negative, I think, is that we had clients who were sitting in jail beginning of 2019 and had a trial date that was set in a few months. And because everything was delayed, because we weren't able to, congregate, and have a lot, more than a couple people in one courtroom, many of them had to sit in custody for a year, 2 years plus, waiting for their case to move on. And yeah, that was very difficult for a lot of people. I know in our case, in our office, there was someone accused. I don't remember the charge, but he had to wait for over a year and ended up being found not guilty and was in custody that entire time. That's difficult. I think it's, a lot of people assume, well, they're criminals, they'd be in jail anyway. People have constitutional rights, number one. And number two is not every person is accused of a crime ends up being found guilty either. So that was a drawback. And then I would say moving forward, there was just a big backlog of cases that we're still working on. We're still trying to catch up. There's still people that have been waiting, a couple years to come back to court on their case. So the nice thing is, courts, like much of the community, is open back up, and we're trying to catch up to, where we were and get all these old cases, resolved or get them, tried in court. But it definitely set us back. There's no question about it.
Would you agree that this election, like the election in 2020, as far as Justice Court and District Court judges are concerned, would you consider this an important year, an important election cycle?
Absolutely.
And why?
And they're all important, but there's a lot of different departments that are up right now. And in addition to that, and if you're a member of the community listening to this, there's always a discussion about whether judges should be appointed or elected. The benefit of judges being elected is that members of the community get to have a say in who their judge is going to be. The way that works is if people participate, people go out and vote, people learn about us, that makes the decision to have elections seem like the correct one. If people don't want to participate and don't want to vote, then it makes it harder to justify electing judges. So I encourage everyone, by all means, vote, get involved, and learn a little bit about us. And I think if momentarily, the viewers will get to see how to contact me, and I encourage everyone.
Yes, please. That was my next question. How do people get a hold of you? Email, website? How do they get a hold of you?
Absolutely, and I'll read it. I know it's on the screen. So my website is berkeley4judge.com. My email is max@berkeley4judge.com. And if you're listening to it and can't see the screen, the 4 is the number 4 typed in, not FOR.
Yes, that's good.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, I figured out most people are watching, but probably a few who are just
Right.
listening. But yeah, reach out to me, reach out to anybody else who's running for office that you may not know as much about. I know with judges it's a little bit harder because it's nonpartisan, so you may not know someone's political background, so you may need to ask a few more questions, and I encourage people to do that. And I mentioned to you before the show, before the primary, there were a lot of people that reached out to me with some great questions, and I love it when people want to participate. So please, if you have anything,
Yes.
after listening to this or watching this, if you've got any follow-up questions for me, please reach out.
Again, we want to thank Mr. Berkley for giving us his time. We understand that as a judicial candidate, you have responsibilities to your campaign, and then you've got, young children. Then you got that work to be done. You got court on Monday.
Absolutely.
So we want to again advise our listening audience and our viewing audience. If you have any questions or you want to find out a little bit more about Mr. Berkley, go to berkeley4judge.com. Remember, it's number 4, or at max@berkeley4judge.com. Those are really cool. I like those names.
Thank
and
you.
I want to thank Rigel Studios for producing this program. And as always, if you have any questions on any gun-related types issues, you can call me on my cellular at area code 702-409-8239. And again, it's been an honor to have you on the show, and I really thank you for this. And we'll be back with another special very soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Don.